Good evening, Strong Stance listeners. You know, if it's felt lately like there has been a huge number of anti-trans bills proposed across the country, it's not your imagination, because there has. NCTE is currently tracking some 49 proposed and inactive bills in 19 states in the 2016 legislative session. And a vast majority of those laws affect transgender and gender non-conforming students. These are the bathroom and locker room bills you've likely heard about, that a student must use the restroom that matches their sex assigned at birth or, in some cases, their genitals. And then there's the bullying. According to the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, only 18 states in the District of Columbia have anti-bullying legislation that mentions sexual orientation and gender identity. Further, they report that only 13 states and D.C. have anti-discrimination laws that protect students based on both sexual orientation and gender identity. And then there's the 8 states with No Promo Homo laws. These are the states that have laws expressly forbidding teachers from discussing gay and trans issues in a positive light, if at all. Alabama's law, for instance, and this is a direct quote, says that classes must emphasize in a factual manner and from a public health perspective that homosexuality is not a lifestyle acceptable to the general public and that homosexual conduct is a criminal offense under the laws of the state, end quote. Now, sandwiched between two of these no promo homo states is Georgia, which can be a bit of a contradiction when considering the city of Atlanta with the rest of the state. But in that beacon of hope that is the ATL, there's an educational institution that's turning the usually traumatic experience of queer students on its head. And tonight, I'm honored to have the executive director of this amazing new school on the line, Christian Zsilavetz. Christian is the executive director of Pride School Atlanta, has a BA in mathematics from Douglas College at Rutgers University, and an MED in creative arts and learning from Lesley University. He is a formerly heterosexual cisgender woman who is now a queer-identified trans man with a wife and 2 children, one of whom is gender fluid. A GLSEN-certified educational trainer, he has been providing cultural competency and personal growth workshops and panels for, by, and with educators, corporations, community organizations, youth, and families since he came out as queer in 1998. He is passionate about creating spaces where everyone is welcome, everyone can work, and everyone can learn, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, or factual preference. Christian, I just want to thank you so very much for joining me tonight. How are you?
Oh, I am excellent. Thank you, Eli, for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to finally have an opportunity to sit down across the miles with you and do this.
Yeah. Before we get into the awesomeness that is Pride School Atlanta, I want to get to know a little bit more about Christian. So can you tell some of our listeners, like, what's your background? What has led you to this moment in your life? I know that's a loaded question and a very packed one. You don't have to give me your entire life history at once, but just something of what is it? What is your background? Where do you come from? How do you find yourself in this space?
It's funny. It's such a great question. Like you said, it is a loaded question, and it's funny because it takes the whole path of who I am and what we're doing to create Pride School Atlanta and how it's all coming about. And it really boils down to angels and resources. My whole path has been, I have all these crystallized moments throughout my life that remind me that there's something working in the universe, whatever it is. Whatever I believe in, I always thought there was something running the universe. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't have a religious upbringing, so it wasn't like the idea of God was forced on me in any particular way, even though my mom was raised in a Catholic family, but they are so not typically Catholic and haven't really, there's no practicing Catholics in my family for the most part. On either side.
That's contrary to about half of my family, where we are all Sicilian Catholic.
Right. And it's funny that even came up because I don't talk about that often. But when I was a kid everybody else, my brother, everybody else, like my mother and all her siblings, there's 5 of them altogether. My father, I believe, his parents are Hungarian American. They all had religious training. And my parents stopped going to church when my brother had received communion, and then they never really went back. And he's 3 years older than me. And so I'd go to church with my grandmother on Sundays when we stayed at my grandma's house, or I'd go for Easter and Christmas, and I really didn't know the drill even. I didn't even know the Lord's Prayer. I mean, that's how little I knew. And so I always felt like I missed out. But then the angel in my life, when I came out for the first time after dating boys, and then I married somebody I went to high school with, and then we split up, and I came out on the tail end of that relationship when I was 27, I realized that it was a gift that I did not have a religious upbringing, because I didn't have to fight against that indoctrination and think that there was something wrong with me because of my religion. And then, and you fast forward a few years later, and when my grandmother died, was the first time I'd been to a Catholic funeral, and they said all the practicing Catholics can come up and receive communion. And the only people who did was, I think, my one cousin out of about 10 cousins, and my grandmother's sister who hadn't talked to her in 40 years. Yeah. And she showed up at the funeral. And I was like, God took care of me. As they say, God takes care of fools and drunks, and so it's, and I blamed the Catholic Church for my mom having a hard time with me coming out, and the truth was my mom had a hard time with me coming out. It took me a while to get, to get my mind around that. And so I've been a teacher since, basically, I signed up to become a teacher when I was 17 or 18 years old. I grew up in New Jersey, which is why I went to Rutgers. I always knew I wanted to be a math teacher. I don't know why. And when I was a straight teacher, my whole personal life was pretty obvious. By the time I was teaching, I had been with my boyfriend for a year, my fiance. We got engaged. We knew each other forever. I got engaged. I wore the rock on my finger. I identified as straight at the time, I think, even though I had attraction for women, but I couldn't put a finger on it really. So I get married. Everybody comes to the wedding. No big deal. We have this crazy relationship. Things start to bottom out. We move out to Washington, to Seattle, by his brother, and basically things got worse. We split up. I stayed, he left, and then I got to start this happy journey of coming out without him around, which was a real blessing to me, because I didn't have to be wondering who was around town, but I knew as a teacher it was time to keep my mouth shut, because I was working in a school, I was married, I got divorced, I came out and started a new relationship with somebody soon enough after, within the space of 2 years. And so I was like, this is just weird for me too, to be married, divorced, and now have this new partner who has 2 kids of her own from her marriage. I somehow knew it became a don't ask, don't tell policy. And yet I had queer students in front of me, one of whom turned out to be trans, one who was gay, who thought I was a liberal straight person, until one day I was like, you know what, Aaron, I'll let you, this kid's great. He's still in my life today. I said, I'll hold on, I got to talk to my girlfriend first, and then I'll be with you in a minute or whatever. And he came back to me and he said, when you said girlfriend, you meant girlfriend, didn't you? I said, yes, Aaron. And he said, he loves it when I tell this story. I said, he's like, oh, all along I thought you were just this liberal straight person. And I said, Aaron, where's your gaydar? I guess I hadn't butched out enough
Right.
You know, I could still pull off the skirts and the, you know, suit or whatever, the business suit with the skirts.
Right. Right.
Once in a while, and I still had earrings, and my hair was short, but it wasn't so completely butch. And I just laugh because here I'm advocating for this out gay youth in my classes, yet I can't say, you know, as a lesbian, as a woman dating women, I need you to know that this behavior is unacceptable. Now, I had a student outside the high school one day say, "Aren't you that dyke teacher?" And I turned to him like, yeah. But then I had the school resource officer escorted me out of the high school for several days until this kid disappeared. Because I'm like, you know, at least they saw what was going on.
Yeah.
But see, and the great part is that one of the reasons I keep doing this is because when we're invisible, the kids who need to see us really can see us, but they have to look really hard, or they have to really know themselves. One girl was a senior. Turns out she was my friend's daughter. She didn't know the connection between me and her mom. And one day somebody said, they were talking about who are the queer teachers. And somebody said, well, what about Miss Z? And she said, and they said, oh, but she's married. And she said, so? And this was 1998.
Yeah.
And they were so savvy. And so this is 20 years ago almost, and the kids were already getting more savvy than we ever were. None of my teachers were out when I was a kid. There was 2 lesbian teachers who were couples. They were so normal. They were so heteronormative that nobody cared. But none of the PE teachers, none of the butch women were out. There were no out gay male teachers. If there were any, they certainly did. The 7th grade, the junior high art teacher. He was flaming. But he never talked about being gay.
Right.
You know, he could have been bi, he could have been whatever. He might not have been queer, but he was pretty flaming.
Right.
But, you know, the jokes fly, and especially when I transitioned, I was like, oh, boy. You know, I had actually decided to leave teaching before I even knew I was transitioning, and I only had to do a month of being Miss Z in the classroom, and I'm so glad.
Okay.
And then then I started testosterone. I got to be a limousine driver, and that was Angels and Resources. I was laying on my couch one day, and I knew I was planning on giving up my condo. I quit teaching, and all of a sudden this limousine job. I was like, I need to do something. I've always wanted to drive. And I flip open the phone book, and I go into this one office, really a bunch of nuts, and she says, well, we're not hiring, but the limo company in the next building is. They share a lot together. And turns out she wouldn't hire women. They hired me on the spot. I heard this afterwards. I'm like, I already identified as male. I just laughed so hard.
Yeah.
But all these bits that come together of being, you know, around people who even if they don't understand you, they honor you, they respect you, they say, okay, what do you need me to put on your ID? And that's all there is to it, you know. Yeah. They've seen it all. Limousine people have seen it all. They, you know, I'm old hat to them. They just want to know what pronouns to tell people. And
now was this still in Seattle?
This was in Seattle. I worked for Seattle Limousine. It was a fabulous corporate company. I'd been around for 40 years, you know, best company in the area. And then I got a call to go back to work from a friend of mine who'd known me forever. She got the lay of the land and said, you know what, I think they agreed this could work out. There was like 10 queer teachers in the building out of 100. Mm-hmm. And I walked into that interview with 2 sets of papers. And I knew that the job was practically mine.